imagine, real conversation starters and kind of get people talking about what's going on. And, typically, the finance and operations response would be, look at all the activity being sucked up to produce a tiny percentage of sales. All those products we're managing, only contributing the bottom 10% of sales, which is true. But the other truth, which the sales and marketing guys will often counter with, is, everybody likes to look at our big winning products. But if you look at a skyscraper, everyone likes to admire the glass and the architecture and the steel that you see above the ground. Nobody thinks about how many stories of structure there are below the ground that are supporting that and making that possible. And again, there's truth to that. Obviously, everybody would love to have a 10 SKU product line and be out there killing it in the marketplace. And we all know that that rarely, if ever, works. So, there needs to be recognition that not every product is going to be a superstar. The other point I would make here that's interesting is if you take that bottom 10% of volume, which in this case is being represented by 86% of the products, and carve that up further into 1% slices, if you will, this is where the opportunities really become clear. And I don't know offhand, but I would guess that in this manufacturer's example, with 86% of the products making up the bottom 10% of the volume, the bottom 1%, I wouldn't be surprised if that was 40 or 50% of their products. So once you start looking at it this way, it's pretty hard to argue with what products ought to be on the list. These bar charts are really just placeholders, but the idea is to do a similar chart by ranking all of the products based on their annual gross profit. And again, how many products are making up each 10% of the company's gross profit. And then again, you can do the same for the variable contribution margin, which again is gross profit less some type of overhead absorption. So the idea is, what I like to call a three strikes analysis. Once you lay out your product line this way, if you've got products that are in the bottom 5%, let's say, on all three of these measures, it's pretty obvious that those are products that definitely need to be reviewed. So this is that starting place of just gathering the financial and the data that will help you get started. So step one, again, was to identify candidates. So we start with this quantitative ranking, do a three strikes analysis, as we talked about, what products are on the bottom 5%, if you will, on all of these criteria. Then you do a category analysis where we go in and we take a look at the product line and look at a price list, a product list, and you can usually identify some redundancies where there's a lot of similar products that maybe all of them aren't needed. And it also gives you the opportunity to start thinking about substitutes and what products you might be able to sell in for those products that you do decide to discontinue. Then we go to the operations, the manufacturing, and the supply chain people and ask them to talk about the products that are giving them particular problems that they wouldn't mind seeing dealt with. And so once you've got all of that input, you then create this list of candidate products which are going to be reviewed with supporting graphs and info. And the idea here, I don't know if I have an example of it, but it's to list these products and to list the criteria why they made the list, whether it's volume, whether it's gross profit, whether it's variable contribution margin, or whether it's because there's an issue operationally with them. And that's the starting place for getting this team together. So the next step is to evaluate this list and develop the action plan. And again, this is really where the bulk of the work and the effort takes place. You present this list of candidates to your cross-functional team, ideally maybe a week or so ahead of sitting down for your meeting, and get them looking at what's on the list and understanding why it's on the list. Then you pull the team together and go through the list and discuss them and understand why each candidate is on the list. And again, you've got the financial information in front of you, you've got the sales and marketing input and the operations input. You should be able to get everybody dealing with the same information. And then the team develops proposed action plans for all candidates. So here's an example of what I was talking about. Obviously a very short list, but you've got your list of products, description, and then just check why are the reasons we're talking about them. Is it volume? Is it gross profit? Contribution margin? Duplicate? We've really got too many similar products. or are there supply chain issues? And obviously some of the products would be on the list for more than one reason. And then with that list, you work down through it, and the team develops proposed action plans. And as I said a few minutes ago, it's not thumbs up or thumbs down. The 4 action plans that I propose are possible. The first one I would call up or out. And really the thinking here is, yeah, we know the volume isn't very good on that one. It's been 6 months. We're disappointed it's not what we thought. But we believe we can take action to try and change that. So we're either going to do some promotional work, or maybe it's a reformulation, maybe it's a pricing issue. But an acceptable decision on some products is we're going to take some action to get it off the list, and we'll give it 6 months, 9 months, a year, whatever you decide. But it's on probation, so to speak. And if we haven't managed to improve the situation in a given time, then we are going to take action to drop that product. So that's up or out. Second one is tolerate. And again, the reality is you're going to have some cats and dogs on your product list. An example would be a custom product that you produce for a chain customer who buys zillions of pounds of a big moving product. So, in some cases, that's a strategic decision that says, yep, we're going to do this in order to satisfy that customer and keep all that business that we love. Another example would be a low-volume product, but it really only requires a 5-minute label changeover at the end of a run on a on a higher volume product. So, yeah, it's kind of ugly on paper. It really doesn't cost us anything, and strategically, we want to hang on to that. So, there are again, very credible, good reasons to decide we're going to, it looks ugly, but we're going to tolerate it. And the point here is you talk about it, you talk about the reasons for it, and you decide you're going to tolerate it, and that takes it off the list. So it's not being brought up every 6 months or every year, why do we do this, why do we do this? You get everyone, again, dealing with the same information. Third choice would be drop and substitute. Yes, we think we can discontinue this, but let's not just drop it. Let's get smart about thinking about what products we can substitute when we go out to present to distributors and operators that we're making these changes, and do everything we can to sell in a substitute item. And a piece of advice here is to cast a wider net maybe than sales and marketing typically would when thinking about substitutes from your product line. If it's a 3.5-ounce breaded fish fillet packed 120 per case, and you feel like you need exactly that, but you've got the same product in a 60 count or a 240 count, or you've got one that's 4 ounces instead of 3 ounces, I would suggest that sales and marketing need to broaden their perspective a little bit in looking at substitutes. And then finally would be what I call drop and sacrifice, which is just recognizing that you're better off without the product, and chances are you're not going to be able to substitute anything, and you're prepared to lose some volume as a result of that. And again, a piece of advice here to sales and marketing, I think it's a good practice to go ahead and recommend a competitor's product to the distributor and the operator if it's something that you just really don't have a substitute for. I think that's it's counterintuitive, but in my mind, that's good salesmanship and marketing. People can feel free to disagree with that. So step 3, again, ideally what you've done here is gone through the product line, and obviously what happens, I'm going to jump back 1 second, when you go through this action plan template is you're going to have disagreement and people seeing things differently. So what I suggest is develop at least 2, maybe as many as 3 or 4 different potential action plans. And they would range from conservative, meaning let's do as little damage as possible, but get rid of some clear